The old saddle still hangs on the wooden fence, covered in dust and memories. Every morning, the wind sways it gently like it's waiting. Waiting for the man who once rode into the sunrise with laughter in his voice and freedom in his heart. But today, that man can barely walk. His legs don't carry him anymore. But his heart still runs wild with his horse. The morning light breaks softly over the hills, washing the old farm in gold. Birds sing their gentle songs, and somewhere in the distance, a horse neighs, a sound that once meant the start of another adventure. The air smells of hay, dust, and something older. Memories that never fade. Inside the stable, the wood creaks with time. The old saddle, brown and worn, hangs where it always has. Nathan's dad used to say that leather carries stories, and this one, it carried a lifetime. Every mark, every scratch on that saddle had a story of its own. It had felt the rain, the sun, and the beating of a heart that loved the open land more than anything. Years ago, before his hands trembled, before his back grew stiff, Nathan's dad would wake before dawn. He'd pour himself a cup of black coffee, nod to the horse in the stable, a strong chestnut mare named Daisy, and ride out before the world even opened its eyes. The earth under Daisy's hooves sounded like a song, a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. It wasn't just a ride. It was peace. But time. Time is quiet and cruel. It takes the strength in your hands and the steady in your steps. It doesn't ask. It just takes. Nathan remembers the day his dad couldn't saddle Daisy anymore. His hands shook too much. The man who once lifted hay bales like feathers now needed help to hold a cup. Still, every time they passed the stable, his father's eyes softened, the kind of look that holds both love and longing. Nathan knew what that look meant. It wasn't about the ride itself. It was about who he was when he rode free, strong, whole. For his dad, the horse wasn't just an animal. It was the last piece of his old self, the part of him that time couldn't steal. And even though the farm had grown quieter, and the fields stood still, something inside those walls, the spirit of that bond refused to fade. Because some memories don't just live in your mind. They live in the air, the ground, the sound of the wind brushing through the fields. Nathan's dad would often sit by the window watching Daisy from afar. He'd smile faintly, eyes shining with the kind of peace that only comes from remembering a life well lived. And even though his body was failing him, his spirit still galloped beside that horse. Every single day, there's something sacred about the way a man and a horse understand each other. No words, no noise, just a quiet trust that grows stronger with time. Nathan's dad never treated Daisy like an animal. She was his partner, his friend, his escape from the weight of the world. When he was younger, every problem seemed smaller once he climbed onto her back. The world looked different from up there, the wind softer, the sun warmer, and life somehow lighter. Daisy wasn't just a horse. She was the rhythm that carried him through every season of his life. From the first ride on a crisp morning to the last gallop under a setting sun, she was always there, loyal, patient. Understanding, Nathan grew up watching them, the man and his horse, a pair that moved as one. He remembered how Daisy would come running the moment his dad whistled. No matter where she was in the field, she always came. Some say animals don't feel love the way humans do, but Nathan knew better. He saw it in Daisy's eyes, that quiet devotion, that knowing look that said, "I'm here." Back then, the farm was alive. The stable smelled of leather and hay, the echo of laughter bouncing off the wooden walls. His dad would tell stories about wild trails, sudden rainstorms, nights under the stars. Daisy would listen, head tilted as if she understood every word. Nathan used to laugh, but deep down, he believed it too. Somehow, Daisy really did understand. Years went by, and the rides became fewer. His dad's hair turned gray, his voice softer, but his eyes, they never lost that spark. Even when he could no longer mount the saddle, he'd still walk to the fence and call her name. And Daisy, even in her own old age, would lift her head, ears twitching, tail swishing gently like a soldier standing at attention for her captain. Nathan's mom used to say, "You can tell a man's soul by how his horse looks at him." And Daisy looked at his dad with something deeper than loyalty. It was love. The kind that doesn't fade with time or age. The kind that waits in the evenings. Nathan's dad would sit by the stable with a blanket over his knees, softly humming the tune he used to whistle on their morning rides. Daisy would stand nearby, her breath rising in small clouds against the cold air. They didn't need to speak. The silence between them was full of memories, full of gratitude, full of everything they'd shared. There's a kind of peace that only comes from being known completely. And that's what Daisy gave him. No judgment, no pity, just presence. A friendship that asked for nothing, but gave everything. And though his strength was fading, that bond stayed unbroken. In her eyes, he wasn't an old man in a chair. He was still the rider she once carried across open fields, the man who whispered her name, like it meant the whole world. The hardest battles are the ones no one else can see. For Nathan's dad, it wasn't the pain in his bones or the medicine bottles lined up on the kitchen shelf. It was what he'd lost inside. The strength that once carried him across open fields was slipping away. There was nothing he could do to stop it. He used to walk to the stable every morning, even when his legs began to fail him. At first, he leaned on the fence. Then he leaned on a cane. And then he stopped walking altogether. The stable stood only 20 steps away from the porch, but for him, it might as well have been miles. Nathan watched the man who had once been unstoppable shrink into silence. The laughter that used to fill the air now came only from old memories. His dad would sit by the window, eyes fixed on the stable door, as if he could see his younger self through it, the rider, the dreamer, the man who once raced the wind. Sometimes Nathan would find him whispering softly, words lost to the sound of the ticking clock. "Just one more ride," he'd say. "Just one more." There was no bitterness in his voice, only longing. A kind of ache that comes from missing who you used to be. Days turned slower. The walls of the house seemed to close in. The old man's hands trembled so much he couldn't even hold a brush to stroke Daisy's mane anymore. So Nathan did it for him. He brushed her coat, cleaned her stall, and told her everything his dad couldn't say. Daisy listened, her ears flicking, eyes soft, breathing slow and steady. Maybe she understood. Maybe she missed him too. But what broke Nathan's heart most wasn't the illness. It was the way his dad pretended to be okay. The way he smiled when Nathan brought in fresh hay or talked about the weather. That quiet, tired smile, the kind that hides 1,000 unshed tears. Every sunset seemed to hit harder. He'd watch the light fade through the window, the orange glow spilling across the floorboards like spilled memories. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and lift his hands slightly, like he was feeling the reins again, holding them tight, ready to ride. Nathan knew what that meant. His dad wasn't asking for miracles. He wasn't fighting time. He just wanted a moment, one last breath of the world he loved. One last rhythm of hooves beneath him. But the world doesn't always wait for our hearts to catch up. And yet, deep inside Nathan, a quiet promise began to form. A promise he hadn't spoken out loud, but one that grew stronger every time he looked at his dad's fading eyes. He would make it happen. Somehow, one last ride. The morning felt different that day. The air was still, almost holding its breath. The light fell softly through the clouds, painting the world in silver. Nathan woke early, heart heavy, but steady, knowing what he had to do. It wasn't just a plan, it was a promise, born from love and silence. He walked out to the stable, where Daisy stood waiting, older now, but still proud. Her eyes followed him, calm and knowing. Nathan whispered, "It's time, girl." She snorted softly, as if she understood exactly what he meant. There was no rush, no fear, just quiet purpose. Inside the house, his dad sat by the window as always, blanket over his knees, eyes lost in thought. But when he heard Daisy's neigh from outside, something lit up behind those tired eyes. A spark Nathan hadn't seen in months. Nathan knelt beside him. "Dad," he said gently, "how about one last ride?" For a moment, the old man didn't speak. His lips trembled, his hands shook. But then, tears filled his eyes. And a soft smile spread across his face. Not the polite smile of someone pretending to be fine, but the real one. The one that came from deep inside. "You mean it?" he asked. voice barely a whisper. Nathan nodded. I do. It took time. It took strength. But they managed. Nathan and his brother lifted him carefully, wrapping a blanket around his legs, steadying his weight. The old man gripped Nathan's shoulder tight, not out of fear, but out of disbelief that this moment was real. As they reached Daisy, the world seemed to pause. The leaves stopped moving, the birds quieted down, and all that could be heard was the horse's slow breathing and the creak of leather. Nathan's dad placed his trembling hand on her mane. Hey girl, he whispered, voice breaking. Did you wait for me? With all the care in the world, Nathan helped him onto the saddle. The movement was shaky, but Daisy didn't flinch. She stood tall, strong, as if she knew exactly how important this moment was. Once he was seated, the old man closed his eyes. The wind brushed against his face, and for the first time in years, his back straightened. Nathan stepped back, watching in awe. His dad held the reins, weak but firm, and Daisy took a slow step forward. Then another. And another. It wasn't fast. It wasn't far. But it was everything. As they moved across the field, the sunlight wrapped around them like a memory come alive. The sound of Daisy's hooves echoed like a heartbeat, slow, steady, full of life. The old man smiled through his tears, whispering, I remember this. I remember. Nathan followed behind, fighting back tears, realizing he wasn't just watching a ride, he was witnessing a goodbye. A beautiful, wordless farewell between two souls who had lived their story to the very end. And for that moment, there was no sickness, no weakness, no pain. There was only freedom. One man, one horse. One last ride, the world seemed to slow down as they reached the edge of the field. The golden light of late afternoon wrapped around them, turning everything warm and gentle. Nathan's dad sat still on Daisy's back, eyes half closed, breathing in the scent of grass and sun, the same scent he'd known his whole life. For a moment, he wasn't old. He wasn't tired. He was just home. Daisy stopped near the oak tree at the far end of the field, the same spot where he had taught. Nathan had a ride when he was little. Nathan stood a few steps away, watching, afraid to break the silence. He could see his father's lips move slightly, whispering words only Daisy could hear. Maybe it was a thank you. Maybe it was goodbye. The breeze picked up, carrying the sound of the saddle's faint creak and the soft snort of the horse. Time didn't exist right then. The earth, the sky, the man, and the horse all felt like one heartbeat, steady and full. Nathan saw his dad's hand slide gently through Daisy's mane. The old man's eyes shimmered, not with pain, but peace. He looked out across the open field, the same land he had spent his life working, the same horizon he had chased in his youth. It's still beautiful, he whispered. Nathan swallowed hard. It always was, Dad. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of the wind moved through the air, brushing against them like a blessing. Daisy lowered her head slightly, almost bowing. Nathan felt something deep in his chest, the kind of ache that comes from knowing this is the last time you'll see something exactly as it is. Then, slowly, his dad turned to look at him. That smile, soft, fragile, filled with love, said everything words could never carry. You keep her safe, he said. Promise me. Nathan nodded, his voice breaking. I promise. Daisy shifted her weight, and Nathan's dad took one last deep breath. His hands loosened around the reins. The wind seemed to hush for him, the world leaning in to listen. His eyes stayed on the horizon, calm, peaceful, as if he was still chasing the sunset one last time. Nathan stepped forward, placing a hand on Daisy's neck. Feeling both their heartbeats, one steady, one slowing. It's okay, he whispered. You can rest now. And in that moment, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the field, something beautiful happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. A silence filled with love, gratitude, and the gentle truth that some goodbyes don't hurt. They heal. The wind moved through the tall grass, carrying the sound of hoofbeats, soft, distant, like a memory fading into the light. Nathan closed his eyes, letting the tears fall, knowing deep down that this wasn't the end. Because love like that never truly ends. It just changes shape. Somewhere beyond that golden sky, Ryder and his horse kept going free again. The field was quiet again. Only the soft rustle of the grass moved through the air, brushing against Nathan's legs as he stood where his father had just been. The sun had slipped lower now, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Daisy stood still beside him, her breath slow and steady, her eyes heavy with the kind of understanding only old souls carry. Nathan didn't cry at first. He just stood there, his hand resting on Daisy's mane, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers. It was strange how something could feel so alive while everything inside you feels like it's breaking. The world didn't stop for him. The wind kept blowing, the birds kept calling, but inside that quiet space, time was suspended. He looked up at the horizon, the same line his father had chased for years. "You made it, Dad," Nathan whispered. "You really did." His voice trembled. But there was pride in it, not pain. Because deep down, he knew his father hadn't just gone. He had returned to the earth he loved, the air he breathed, the freedom he lived for. Daisy moved closer, pressing her head gently against Nathan's shoulder. It wasn't just comfort, it was connection. The two of them shared something sacred now, something that didn't need words. They were both part of his father's story, and in that moment, Nathan understood what his dad had always meant when he said, "A good horse remembers your heart." The days that followed felt different. The house was quieter, emptier, but also lighter somehow. The air inside carried a strange peace, as if his father's presence had simply shifted places, not vanished. Nathan would find himself pausing at the window, just as his dad once did, watching Daisy graze near the fence line. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, he swore he could hear the faint echo of laughter, his father's laughter. Active carried across the field, he began to take care of Daisy the way his dad once had. Every morning, he brushed her coat, cleaned her stall, whispered to her softly. It wasn't just about keeping her fed, it was about keeping that bond alive. Each gentle movement felt like a way of saying, "I remember too." At night, Nathan would sit by the old saddle hanging on the wall. The leather still smelled the same, faintly of dust and sun and years gone by. He'd run his fingers along its worn edges and close his eyes. He could almost see it, his dad's hands tightening the straps. Daisy pawing the ground impatiently, the first step into another ride. Loss had changed shape for Nathan. It wasn't an emptiness anymore. It was a presence, quiet, comforting, like a shadow that follows light. His dad hadn't left him with sorrow. He had left him with purpose. To live, to ride, to keep the memory breathing. And as he looked at the open land stretching before him, Nathan realized something his father had always known, that love, real love, doesn't fade when someone's gone. It lingers in the wind, it grows in the grass, it rides on in the hearts of those who remember. Some stories don't end when the last word is spoken. Some rides never really stop. Morning light falls softly across the stable, spilling through the cracks like threads of gold. The world feels calm again. Not empty, not broken, just ... Still Nathan stands by the fence, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching Daisy graze in the field. The same field where his father took that last ride. It's been weeks now, but every morning feels the same. The same quiet, the same sky, the same whisper of wind that seems to say, he's still here. Maybe he is, not in body. But in the rhythm of life that never stopped, Nathan has kept everything just the way his dad left it. The saddle still hangs by the stable door. The bridle, the brush, the old hat, all waiting, like time itself refuses to move forward. But there's comfort in that. These things aren't reminders of loss. They're proof of love. Sometimes Nathan rides Daisy himself. He doesn't go far, just around the same path his dad used to take. The first few times he felt the ache of absence, the hollow quiet that comes when you're riding alone. But over time, something changed. The rides began to feel different, warmer, lighter, as if someone was still there riding beside him, unseen but deeply felt. The neighbors still talk about that last day, how beautiful it was, how peaceful. They say the sun never looked quite the same again. Nathan doesn't tell them, but he agrees. Every sunset since then feels like a promise, a gentle reminder that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise. One afternoon, Nathan takes an old photo from the shelf, his dad sitting proudly on Daisy, both framed in sunlight. He holds it in his hands for a long time, smiling through the tears that quietly fall. "You've got your last ride, Dad," he whispers. "But you gave me my first lesson in forever." He places the photo on the stable wall, right above the saddle. Now, when the wind blows, it brushes against the picture and makes it sway, as if nodding, as if his dad is still saying, "Good job, son." The camera would linger here on Nathan walking across the field, Daisy following behind him. The sky burns orange and pink, the horizon glowing like an ember that refuses to fade. The faint echo of hoofbeats fills the air, not loud, not near, but distant. Timeless, and in that sound lives everything this story was ever about. Love that outlasts time, loyalty that never wavers, and memories that never die. Because some bonds are too strong for goodbye. Because some rides, the truest ones, never end, fade out. Soft piano music plays. On-screen text appears, for every heart that still remembers. This one's for you.